E te whananga me mihi atu ki kā koe. E wātanga he whakaaro koro ke puta ki ngā whakaore pānga ki ngā taki o te wānei. He rā rangatira hara ma ka whiti mai te rā ki kore he mea nui tēnā. He tohu pai mō te tauhau I mua I a tāwei hoa.
Ai. Pai rawa atu te kitinga puanga I te ata nei, tū mai ana hau ki waho nei o te Lighthouse Motel, nā te mea o te tino makariri rawa atu ka hara mai a hau ki te noho mō te Wāpoto and Pira no wetahi o ngā tini whānau e noho kore whare ana ko a hau hoki tēnā. Nō reira, pai rawa atu I te oho ake, tiro haere, pēhia, ngā āhuatanga. Hioi anō te maha o te kohu. Awa ke te rā, he maha ngā kohu e rere mai ana ngā wairua, maronga I te waka wairua, ki ro I te whanga o Hokianga Nui a kupe. Mai taku kitinga ki tērā atu taha e honu ana. Maheo anō ki tēnā pea tai atu ki Wainganui o te moana nei, pai rawa atu whiti mai ana te rā, kare au kitea I tērā taha o Pauahi. Nō reira, he mea miharo I te kitea I te āhuatanga o te moana, ngā kohu e rere mai ana, e rere atu ana hoki, me ngā āhuatanga o ngā wairua I tēnei wā. Hioi anō, taku kitinga, pai rawa atu I te mutunga o te tau. Nā te mea he tino o aua, ka e aku whakaro kia hoki mahara hau ki Wharerau ngā tau o te corona o COVID, kia tīmata ai wetahi o ngā comms and engagement plans, wetahi atu plans e COVID raru ana, hioi anō kia tīmata ai kia pū te āwhatanga o te Māori ora, te tihei Māori ora, I roto I wetahi o ngā momo mahi, hei angi tū, hei anga haka haere, mō te anga haka moa. Nō reira, pērā anō I wetahi o ngā āwhatanga mō ngā whānau. Ioi anō I tēnei wā, tēnā pēr kia noho, kia pupuri wetahi o ngā āwhatanga mō te tau, kia oti ai, me pēhea I wetahi o ngā ama kia waihongia ki tērā taha, me āta tiro haere ki wetahi o ngā āhuatanga pai te whai mō tēnei tauhau. Pērā anō aku whakaro au ake te rānei. Ioi anō, just having a really big reflection on the housing mahi, particularly I hoa, it's been especially hard for our whānau. I think a little bit more or a little bit less resilient than we used to be. COVID took its whack out on the many of our whānau, and then we got hit with the floods, the cyclone, and then the floods again, all in a period of just these last 6 months. So it's been quite an interesting sit down with different whānau. Their spirits are lifting, especially when the sun is shining. But it's taken them a lot longer, and it's been a lot harder for them to rise above some of the challenges that they're facing at the moment. And, my heart goes out to the many of our whānau who are feeling it right now. And luckily, I feel blessed last week when we spent time with the MB Temporary Accommodation Support Team to go over, how we can impact and provide some support services, emergency and temporary support services, housing services for some of our whānau. As you know, our kaimahi and our connectors three from the north side of Hokianga and 3 from the south were on the final ends of their housing survey, and I will say we actually got them to pivot all during the floods and the cyclone and the floods again, so that they could focus in on their whānau, but also be able to support other whānau in any support services or connecting up with either the Mural Fund or any other fund that we could get our hands on to help them. And so it's been very slow, but I really want to do a massive shout out to ngā wahine toa, mai tērā pito o te ao, kia Mariah Herbert Pickering, Julianne Nightingale, and Emma Maria Davis ki tērā taha o te whanganei, me ngā wāhine o konei ki tēnei taha ko Whai Whi, Fiona Reihana Ruka, Justine Mikaira, me Minia Beachgood, nā reira, nā rātau, ngā wāhine e rapurapu haere we tahi o ngā āhuatanga tino taumaha i runga i ngā pokowhiwhi o ngā whānau. Hioi anō ngā kaunui rātau hei haere ki ro te whare o ngā whānau, o wetahi whānau karekau whare. And so, you know, some of our whānau who are still in that space of no housing, because we have to remember that's all on top of our current severe housing deprivation state here in Hokianga. We already had a housing crisis, and it's a houseless crisis, not a homeless one, because many of our whānau are living on the kāinga, living on our whenua Māori. But they don't have houses. So, you know, to go through that process and then be impacted by severe weather conditions has been a real challenge for many of our whānau, and for our kaimahi who've gone in there to try and provide some support in that space. They've been pretty much the front runners of and receivers of some of that level of desperation and of the housing conditions for our whānau. You know, just quietly for Hokianga and probably for Taitokero, it was a very eye-opening experience for the team that came up, because there was nobody who put forward an application for temporary accommodation support. And that's a no-brainer. As soon as you click on the website, it comes up with who's your council, and it's FNDC. So there's automatically a negative response and reluctance to actually click on anything, because it comes up with FNDC, especially if you're in an unconsented whare. You know, so we finally got through some real clear messages with MB at this point in time regarding their support for temporary accommodation, and that is to not disclose any of our whānau and keep their details confidential regarding consent on their current housing situation. The other next part of that little process is if you're insured, you know, that's again the same for our whānau. So, you know, I think it was wonderful that they came up, they listened, and e hoa, we had 174 pretty severe cases that were impacted by the floods, as well as the cyclone and some more recent flooding, just in our survey, and that's excluding other whānau who didn't participate in the survey. So out of that 174, 27 were real chronic, and so that those 27 houses that either had trees come down on them, on their caravans, on their sheds, cow sheds they were living in, inside of a house, and funnily enough, one tree missed the tent for the whānau that were living in the tent. So, you know, it's a bit of a no-brainer when you have that sort of an example. All the cabins are rolled off the whenua or smashed the cabin that they were in. So that's actually happened a lot on the south side, not as much on the north side, but they experienced a lot of, you know, through the flooding, not so much during the cyclone, but through the flooding, experienced some severe chronic conditions as well. So, you know, we're on the road to helping them out. There are a lot of conversations going on at the moment to especially provide some impact for the 27 whānau who are in that chronic state of crisis, and looking at providing them with support from both MB and hopefully with MHUD support as well. You know, so that's kind of a little bit of a quick update on our housing survey, Mahi. It comes to an end at the moment. And, you know, no surprises on the findings. Aye. You know, and this is a preliminary kind of response, really, without going into having a really good look and sharing it with our with our other collaborative partners, which is Te Matapihi, the National Māori Housing Network, and Te Roroa. And so, a couple of revealing considerations have come out too. A couple of hapu have requested the data be the anonymised data is handed over to them. And so, it's a due diligence process regarding the whānau who have provided consent to share, but also that they follow through with a huia hapu and, that process of getting in touch with us and sending us that result via their hui and their tikanga inside the wharenui, and so that we can share that anonymised data with them. And then, of course, there will be a report that will come out following this. In the meantime, some things on the horizon that we have happening, we're working really closely with Te Hukatu Hapu, who were endorsed to have the Te Huko project, which is the renewable energy project, and we sign off on that contract. So we've been successful with that MB Māori Housing Renewable Energy Fund, and so we'll be looking at rolling that out probably around September, and just following a bit of establishments mahi at the moment in terms of getting kaimahi on board and doing the energy profiling with whānau in specific areas of Te Hukatu. So that's Motutoa all the way up to all the way through to Koutu, and Papa Arthur's is the last whare, and then following on from that is over to the Leafs whare. So I say that because many of our whānau from Te Hukatu live outside of our whenua that we had identified at a huia hapu. So, the director from the last huia hapu was very, very clear, and thankfully so. They've been it's really, really fundamental with this level of engagement, especially when our hearts go out to our marae and kohanga and kura, but they've also been very clear there's also the governance role of responsibility that marae trustees have had to follow through with due diligence as well. So that's some exciting things on the horizon for this year.
Aye.
And then being able to scale that out through other hapu areas in Hokianga is our next deal, So and I will say we learnt a lot from the flooding, the floods and the cyclone and the weather events, especially around some of the support systems that we saw straight away. We needed to get sewage tanks or septic tanks emptied. A lot of our septic tanks were, after the floods, rised up and went through whare. So, there's some massive reflections. Sorry, sort of, that's quite a heavy one, but it's definitely one that you have to be able to get off your shoulders so that you can just nurture your own wairua in order to help lift you up to get through these other little mountains that we have to climb.
Tēnā koe te tūn meu mahi nui rau tu me ngā tuene hoki awhi tia manaki hea. Tēnei kaupapa nui mō i tātou e pāna ki ngā chaki te whānau, chaki te whenua, chaki ngā tāo, ngā katoa. Hoi no me mihi anu ki kia koe. Me ngā kore pote mai ia koe pāna ki ngā mahi chaki te whānau, pāna ki ngā whare noki, he kaupapa nui taki nui anō hoki tēnā e te tuene. Hoi no, ko muti māre ka tāwa, koro mo te wā nei, ko pau te wā, engari e paina, ka potaki ngā whakārui, ngā kore nui, me mihi anu ki kia koe. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, ngā mahina nui kia koe hoki e hoa. Me tō whānau, hei noho haumaru te noho ki roto i tō whare, mahana hoki, no reira he mahina nui tēnā ki ngā whānau katoa Hokianga nui a kupe, Hokianga whakapau karakera. Kia ora, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe te tūne, ngā mihi nui tēnei kia koe, tēnā koe.